Today we're going to try to demonstrate with this fixture, which is one of several that we built to do testing on this new product that we've come up with for the Vans A-model aircraft. This one probably demonstrates best the forces that are involved on this gear leg. A little bit about the machine first. This gauge reads in pounds, which is exactly a level reading. In other words, if it says 300 here, there's actually 300 pounds of push. This represents the tire, obviously, and the caster, and the gear leg, and the gear brace. Now, this white line at the bottom represents the contact patch that the tire has when it has 50 pounds of air. And most people don't run 50 pounds, but we've found that that would add a considerable margin of safety over the 35 or so that most people run. Now you can see the patch is this long with 50 pounds. So when you are on the ground, say taxiing with the full nose weight on the airplane in a forward direction, the push isn't straight up and down like this. It goes from this edge of the contact patch to the center line of the axle, which puts a different force on it than's on the airplane when it's just sitting still. Now, as an example, most nose wheels on the Vans aircraft never go over maybe 400 pounds. So we use 400 pounds for this test. So if we operate this and we bring it up to 400 psi, you can see that there's a considerable amount of deflection. It's moved up, well, right here, approximately an inch, which would be great if that's what the airplane actually saw in service. It isn't. When it's in service, like I said, and it's rolling forward, where you would have a problem, the angles are pushed from wherever the front of the contact point is to the center line of the axle. Now, if you were to hit something this high, then this is the angle that it's being pushed on. That being said, let's try a couple other scenarios here. Let's move it into the positions that it would see in real life. So, first, let's just move it to where the contact patch is, which is what it would see in an ideal situation. Now, in a landing situation, when the tire contacts the ground and there's any weight on it, this is the angle it's pushing on. So let's look at that. Now as you can see, the gear leg isn't going up at the same rate that it was before, and we've already got the 400 pounds on here. What you see is the gear leg is bending this direction because of the caster. So we can go up here, there's 500, and you can see the gear leg is still in position where it belongs. This is great. You probably would never see any more than this in a normal landing. But if you were to do an off-field landing or hit an obstacle laying in the runway, a piece of debris, a big crack, a gopher hole, the situation really changes. Now with the gear brace on here, the situation isn't nearly as drastic. For instance, let's say we were to hit a hole that was only this deep, which is pretty much nothing. That's only about an inch. Now, with the gear brace on, if you watch the action that takes place, the gear is moving back the other way. It's not moving up like it should be. To absorb the hole, it's actually moving downward, which is potentially making it worse. It's trying to drive it into the hole. So we'll go a little more here. And we still don't have any weight on here. So we'll go a little more. Now if you look, you see that the gear leg, because it's deflecting here, is starting to come down and close the gap against the brace. Now, once the gear leg closes that gap, we're at the 400 pounds. It's closed the gap. You really don't want the gear leg to deflect back any more than this. This is pretty much the maximum that it should see. Now, we can add more, and as we add more, you see the gear leg isn't bending in here anymore. It's moving up to the stronger position. It's moving as a complete assembly rather than just bending in here. Without this on there, the forces would have bent this by now. It doesn't take hardly anything to destroy this gear. We destroyed several of them in this fixture and in another test fixture that we have built for testing. Now, here we're at, here's 800 pounds. And you can see there's no more bending going on here. It's all been transferred up. A gear leg without the brace would have failed by that point. So now let's move it back down to what is a normal, what you would see on a runway landing. Now let's put some weight on it. Okay, now we're at 1,000 pounds, and you can see it hasn't hurt the gear leg. It's just changed its characteristics to where it bends in a more desirable location. There's 1,500 pounds. That would be the equivalent of over the full weight of the aircraft on the nose wheel, which is, everybody knows that's a no-no. Much of the problems that have been encountered with this gear leg have been strictly pilot technique or landing technique. And you can work around that. You can never make a mistake. But the day that the engine quits, or you have a problem, or something presents itself, you're landing and you hit something that you didn't know was there, such as a depression in the ground, or who knows, if you have a problem and you're landing off field, you could put it down, and just the slightest little bit of irregularity in the ground could make the airplane go over on its back. So this is how the thing performs with the brace on. Now I'm going to take the brace off, and we'll try a couple of the tests again just to see the difference. I've removed the gear brace, left the clamp on. It's loose and really has no effect on the performance of the gear leg. So now we're going to do the same test again without the brace on. If you remember a moment ago with the brace on, we were able to put 1,500 pounds onto this at this landing angle or contact patch angle, and with not an over amount of deflection. And 1,500 pounds is a considerable amount. If you were to hit something, it isn't. 1,500 pounds would be easily achievable if you were to hit, you know, a gopher hole or impression in the ground that brought this contact point up at all. It would be relatively easy to get 1,500 pounds of force on a gear leg. So now let's try the bending again at the same position as we had before, and just see what we get. So here's only 200 pounds. There's 300 pounds, 400 pounds, and we're already at the point where we were with the gear brace on and had 1,500 pounds of force against the wheel. So there's 500 pounds, and much more than 500 pounds in the gear is at the point where you're about to the point where it yields here, and much more than that and it won't come back. We've kind of learned it from experience by destroying a few gear legs. So there, we're at 600 pounds, and I mean, I'm not really comfortable bending it any further than that. 600 pounds, and it's deflected further than it would be with 1,500 pounds with the gear leg on, or the gear brace on, excuse me. This pretty much demonstrates the difference. The gear brace really isn't a stiffener, because it still allows the gear to move normally in the ranges that it should be moving in. It's there more of a safety, that when you take the gear to the point where you run the risk of it taking a permanent set and bending, the gear brace acts as a stop to keep the gear from failing in this point right here where it always fails, where it's the smallest. Now, the advantage, or main advantage, is even if you hit an immovable object that's going to fail the gear. Let's say you were to hit something as high as this, or this is bent down, and so this becomes lower, and you contact the ground with this, it's going to fail. It's going to come back and bend. But it takes more to get this to come down and hit the ground with the gear brace on, by about 3 times more than it would without it. Should you hit something that makes it fail, instead of the gear rolling up like a snail, it moves the point of where it bends up to this area. So it bends down as a complete unit rather than folding up. And as it bends down as a complete unit, it gets longer. The distance between the attach point at the motor mount and the ground becomes longer rather than shorter. Pitching the nose of the airplane up slightly, maybe giving you a chance to recover or react before the problem snowballs and you go over on your back. So, nice safety device that adds a little bit of smaller margin of safety to the gear leg. I have one on my personal airplane, flown it many hours now. I've noticed no difference whatsoever in the ride or the way the airplane taxis or anything other than should you hit something. Now, we did lay some items out and run into them, to the point where we actually failed the gear, failed just right in this area, and it was actually only done at about 8 miles an hour. So much more than that, and I could have potentially went over on my head. So nice unit. If you'd like more information, just contact us and we'd be more than happy to provide some more.